Hopefully some of you find this interesting. Personally, I'll never forget it. For a little background, I was 18 at the time and had been on a bushwalking road trip with my dad in the NSW Outback. I was set to meet up with my brother and a mutual friend in a small rural town to go vermin shooting on a huge outback property. I had been in the Army Reserve for more than a year and a member of the Scout movement for more than 5 years. I spent a lot of time, and still do, hiking and camping solo, and really enjoyed the solitude of the Australian bush. I provide this context to highlight that I was very experienced and comfortable with being in remote and desolate locations. So after my dad dropped me off at my friend's place and my brother arrived, we piled into our friend's car and headed into the outback as night fell. After several hours, we arrived at our destination and walked into the dark to hunt with 22s, a 243 and a shotgun. We set up a basic camp before sunrise and slept until about midday. Then, back out for another night shooting. On the third night, we only stayed out for a few hours. Over the 2 whole days, we did not see another soul. I feel this is important to mention because what happened to me next had nothing to do with the remoteness or bush setting. On the last morning, after packing up camp, our friend wanted to visit a small town nearby where there was a natural hot spring pool to soak in before the drive home. This sounded like a fantastic idea, so we went. As we drove into the small town, I sensed what I recall as a hissing or buzzing sound that gave me intense goosebumps and shivers. At first, I thought it might have been one of those passing moments that disappears as soon as it starts, but this feeling continued and even intensified. It was a horribly oppressive feeling that I did not know how to handle. My brother and friend got out and dived into the pool, but I could not bring myself to do anything, spending the next 20 to 30 minutes feeling like I was about to throw up, and I never throw up. I didn't know how to communicate my feelings to the other two, so I did not say anything. We jumped back into the car and drove back the way we came, and the feeling subsided. It was a little while later that I realized I felt okay and was able to relax a little, but I remember being confused and feeling weird for the next few hours. I have heard about times where a person or place didn't resonate, and that is exactly what this was. It was more than a feeling of discomfort, more like a feeling of dread and danger. But I was the only one of us who felt it. I spoke to my brother years later about it, and he only vaguely recalled the visit to the town and pool at all, but remembers the camping and hiking part vividly. I have never been back to that small town, but often think about it and wonder whether it would have the same effect now. I've always had a weird sleep schedule, and when I was 15 to 16, it was very common for me to be up at 2 a.m. and later in the summer. One night around 3, I decided to go outside into my backyard and get some fresh air since it was a warm night. At the time, I lived in the suburbs in southern Tennessee in a pretty run-down neighborhood. The house next to ours had been abandoned for a couple of years, and I always joked that it was cursed because 3 separate people had bought it, moved in, and then sold it and moved away again, all within the span of maybe 5 years before that. At this time, the house was unoccupied and had been so for some time. While I was outside, I started listening to music on my MP3 player with my headphones on. After a while, I started hearing a growling/snorting noise that wasn't super loud, but still managed to get past my headphones and music. After pausing my music and listening for a minute, I realized it was coming from behind me, where the abandoned house was. It sounded like something pretty big was making the noise, and I figured maybe a large stray dog had gotten into the neighboring yard somehow. Since that yard and mine were separated by a tall, sturdy fence, I just ignored it and went back to my music. The noises continued periodically, and finally, after a while, I decided to just go over the fence and find out what was making them. As I approached the fence, I heard rustling sounds from the other side, like something moving in the grass. Figuring now that it was almost definitely a stray dog, I leaned in close to the fence and looked through a crack in one of the boards. A pair of huge yellow eyes was staring directly back at me, at eye level with mine. I kinda stood there frozen, like an idiot, for a few seconds. But then I heard the growling noise again, this time inches from my face, and that snapped me out of it. I turned and ran back into my house, locked the doors, and failed to sleep that night. The next day, I looked through the fence again to see if there was any logical explanation. Maybe it had been a dog standing on a table or a stack of boxes for some reason, but the yard was still totally bare. No boxes, no patio furniture, nothing. Whatever had looked at me was actually as tall as I was. I moved away years ago and never went back, so I have no idea how that house is or that neighborhood are doing now, but for the rest of the time that I lived there, I deliberately ignored any and all weirdness from the other side of that fence. When I was in high school, there was a lot of local folklore about a man who allegedly shot and killed his wife and daughter before taking his own life in their family home. The incident occurred many years prior in a now abandoned 2-story home located between 2 wheat fields. I grew up in the boonies, so it was quite common for old farmhouses to be built in such a manner. The year was 2001, and my senior year had just begun a couple of months prior. I don't remember the exact month, but I'm assuming October, because I remember the crisp, cool autumn air had just rolled upon us. One evening, a group of about 8 or so friends and I decided we would visit the infamous home and scope it out for kicks. Before leaving my house, I had the idea I would play a prank on my pals, which involved a small bottle of red food coloring. I placed the food coloring in my pocket, locked my bedroom door, and left to meet up with the gang. We arrived at the location in 2 separate cars. One car was packed with the guys. The other car was driven by one of our female classmates and 2 of her girlfriends. The house was situated on a slight hill which met a gravel driveway. We parked our cars in the driveway in front of the home's garage and began our trek up the hill. The very first thing I noticed has a very sad, dead-looking tree located in the middle of the yard. The grass felt very strange beneath my feet, quite spongy and soft, as though it was rotted with disease. This particularly stood out to me because I had never felt grass quite like this before, especially without any recent rain. The house was completely boarded up with plywood, but there was still a small opening in the front door, which appeared to be broken from a previous visitor. Equipped with our flashlights, we began scoping out the interior of the home, searching for any evidence a murder actually took place. The interior was decorated with dingy floor wallpaper. The floors were bare hardwood throughout. In the main entryway, we saw what happened to be blood spatters where the wall met the ceiling, and several apparent gunshot holes. I'm a skeptic by nature and thought it could have possibly been faked by previous visitors to feed into the lore. Whichever the case, the blood appeared a very dull brown color, indicating it had been there for a very long time. We walked up a set of creaky steps to the upstairs, which featured 2 bedrooms. One room had an old metal bed frame and bare mattress, but was otherwise empty. I can't remember if I entered the second room or not. We all stood in one of the bedrooms talking and expressing our predictions as to what we believe happened before making our way back downstairs. We continued exploring the main level living space and dining before reaching the kitchen. I noticed there was a door leading from the kitchen to a small breezeway behind the house. I was the first to check it out and knew this was the time to pull off my prank. As I entered the breezeway, I reached into my pocket, tilted my head back, and filled my entire eye socket with the red food coloring. I banged my flashlight against the wall to create a loud thud, fell to the ground, and screamed at the top of my lungs. Fuck! Something just hit me! Go, go, go! We all bolted from the house at top speed. One of the girls even stumbled down the hill and collided with her passenger door. I entered the backseat of her car holding my eye, screaming with my hands and face covered in fake blood. I remember the girl in the passenger seat yelling over and over, "Get him to the ER! Get him to the ER! His eye is gone!" They frantically drove about 15 to 20 minutes to the nearest hospital, as I writhed in pain in the back seat. The entire ride, I was wailing, "Something hit me! I don't know what it was! What the fuck just happened?" We finally get to the hospital parking lot, with the other car right behind us. Everyone got out, and we began swiftly walking to the entrance, before I let out a maniacal laugh to reveal it was all a prank. A couple of the girls were pretty pissed, but the guys completely lost it and couldn't stop laughing. After several minutes, the mood lightened, and the other girls finally saw humor in the situation. Overall, it was a hit. I got home late that night and cleaned up for school the next morning. When I woke up, everything felt completely off. I kept hearing what sounded like incessant whispering ringing in my ears. It reminded me of the sound of people whispering in church at a funeral, with the sound of the letter S resonating the most. I walked over to my closet to grab a t-shirt and noticed a freezing cold spot in my room. Just in front of my closet, our house didn't have central air, only heating vents in the floor, so this frigid spot made absolutely zero sense. I opened my closet door, and every single piece of clothing was laying in a ball on the floor. I was dumbfounded because I locked my door before. I always hung up my clothes, even my t-shirts. My house was empty that morning because my mom worked the 12-hour night shifts, and my little brother spent the night at our cousin's house because I knew I wouldn't get home until late the night before. As I walked downstairs to my living room, the whispering sounds intensified. Goosebumps covered my arm, and my heart started to pound. I grew very alarmed as I realized this was more than just morning cobwebs or grogginess. I drove to school, and the whispering sounds would not stop. I thought I was completely losing my mind. I pulled one of my friends, who is a devout Christian, into the restroom and started crying. I told him I thought maybe I was haunted due to my antics from the night before. I tried my best to explain the situation, but I caught him off guard, and I didn't feel like he was taking me seriously. As the school day went on, the whispering sounds persisted. My friends who were there for the shenanigans couldn't stop talking about my prank. I did my best to hold myself together and not to reveal that anything was wrong. I didn't want that kind of attention, and especially didn't want them to think I was crazy, since the heart-to-heart with my Christian friend didn't go the way I anticipated. When the school day ended, I immediately checked my room and still felt a freezing cold spot in the front of my closet. I truly believe at this point I was without a doubt being haunted. A few days went by and I was having great difficulty sleeping. I kept seeing/envisioning a dark shadow in the corner of my room, about the height of a small child. I did my best to ignore it, as the shadow began to move from one spot to another, eventually standing directly beside where I rest my head. The following day, I told my mom about my visit to the abandoned house and the prank I pulled on my friends. She was very disappointed. I would disrespect the alleged murdered victims, but she was also very supportive in me finding help. She's very spiritual and recommended I meet up with a church member to get cleansed, and also have my room cleansed. I did not and still don't subscribe to religion in the slightest. However, at this point, I was desperate. I went to the church and bared my soul to a priest, expressing sorrows for my actions, for fooling my friends, entering the abandoned house, and exploiting victims for my personal amusement. Later that evening, a member of the church came to my house, lit candles and said a prayer in my bedroom. The next day, no more cold spot, no more audible whispering. After a week of feeling absolutely insane, it seemed to be over. About a month later, I developed a very deep depression. I began feeling incredibly dark emotions I had never felt before. These feelings would continue to grow through the winter and into the spring of 2002, when baseball season rolled out. I was a lifelong baseball player who was being recruited by a few schools in the area. I was so depressed I opted not to play, forfeiting any possible chance at a scholarship and thus ending my baseball career. A decision I strongly regret today. I had simply lost interest in everything other than sleeping. I shut out my friends, parents, pretty much everyone for the next couple of months. By the time graduation rolled around, I ended up rekindling a friendship with one of my early childhood friends. He and I played baseball together back in first grade, and were best friends in grade school. We kind of drifted apart over the years, but something drew us back together and we hung out all summer. The stronger our friendship became, the less apparent my depression was. It ultimately fizzled out by fall, and I ended up attending college out of state. 20 years later, the whispers haven't come back. No cold spots, no dark shadows, nothing. All put to rest. I haven't thought about my haunting in a very long time, but this past year it's crept up from time to time. No bad feelings, just memories. I've been wanting to tell this story for the past couple months to hopefully aid anyone who may be experiencing something similar. Whether it was a true supernatural experience or my own fears projected into reality. I needed help, and I'm so very thankful I spoke up. Thanks especially to my mother, who pushed aside her disappointment to ensure her son was okay. If you're feeling off, please ask for help, no matter how silly your problems may sound. Peace.